name is Audrey Dye, and I am a mock interviewer for Talent Stacker. I am like you all. I have gone through the Talent Stacker program, and I'm going into my second year as a consultant in the ecosystem. I just Disclaimer, I don't do any recruiting for my company. I don't talk about their recruiting process. I've not ever recruited for them. So if you look me up on LinkedIn, just know I don't represent them or don't share their philosophies on recruitment or anything like that. But I do have a background in recruitment. I spent a little over 10 years in the human resources world prior to Talent Stacker and on into the Salesforce ecosystem, recruiting for several different roles, IT, architects, engineers, financial VPs, all the way to CEOs down to tellers. Really have run a whole different a gamut, have done a lot of hiring for a lot of different hiring managers as well. And that's something when I do my mock interviews with folks is just to remind them, recruiters do one thing, but then when you go through the interviewing process, you're often going to see a lot of different hiring managers. And so you kind of have to tweak what you're saying to the audience that you're in front of a little bit. And we're going to talk through that a little bit this evening too. So I'm excited to be here with y'all tonight. Thank you for taking some time in your evening. I am hopeful that this is interactive, so I'd encourage you to come off mute and turn on your camera if you're so inclined, and just participate as much as you can. As all things, in my experience with Talent Stacker and the Salesforce ecosystem, you do get out of it what you put into it. So I'd encourage you to take notes if you like to, or jump in and ask questions as we go along. That would be great. I want this to be worthwhile for you and for people of all different backgrounds to get something from it. So that is a little bit about me. I have 8 certifications now. And then I landed my first job back in May, and I just actually moved to a different role within my company. I'm an engagement manager for them. I'm really actually getting to use some of my background in the business world, trying to help set strategy and road mapping and goals for our clients, as well as helping them with their technical builds. So I'm just blessed to be here and to share a little bit of my recruiting experience with all of you. So I do want to just level set a little bit on the baseline of phone interviews. Like I said, they can look a lot different, but in my experience in conducting them and in having done them myself, you often are going to find that a phone interview is with a recruiter. That's very common. If you're, talking to a larger company, they would have their own internal recruiter likely who you would have a phone interview with. If not with a larger company, often you'll be speaking to, say, the company owner or the founder. That was actually my first phone interview in the Salesforce ecosystem, was with a very small company, and it was the founder who I spoke with. And so you might interface with someone at that level. And then it could also be the delivery manager or someone who's kind of over top all of the projects or whatnot that are going on. I don't think you're as likely to see, for example, in an administrative position, that you would speak to like your supervisor right off the bat, unless they were a founder or the company owner. Usually that would be more they'd be considered the hiring manager, and that would be probably like the second type of interview. So when we say interviews, when would we anticipate that those would happen? Usually it happens after your resume review. So really your resume, right, is like the ultimate gatekeeper that helps you get into the process. And as long as you can kind of get through that first step, then that recruiter would reach out to you, often via LinkedIn or Indeed, or they might even call you unannounced, to go ahead and schedule a phone interview for their company. So that's usually when we see phone interviews. And then, especially if you are virtual, then after that, it would be more of probably like a Zoom interview or an in-person interview if you are going on site. Like I mentioned before, they can kind of come in varying different ways, either email, perhaps a LinkedIn message, or like I said, even a cold call. And it is that gatekeeping, kind of that second round of gatekeeping that really, I don't find most often that they're typically, extensive. It's just that initial, is it worth us investing a little bit more time to learn more about this candidate? So it's kind of that first initial gatekeeping step in the interview process. Length of time, I think usually you're going to see probably no more than 30 minutes. 10 to 15 is probably pretty common, that they'll be just pretty quick and dirty, as they say. And then structure-wise, when I've done them myself and when I've participated in them as the recruitee, not the recruiter, they really are just a condensed down version of a regular interview. It just moves through a little bit faster, just to kind of get a feel for you and what you bring to the table. And like I said, whether or not they want to continue talking with you further. Any questions on any of that? Okay.
I had no questions or observation. Yeah. I find with recruiters, they're often, especially if they're pushing a job, it's like they really want to nail you down on salary, like what are you looking for? Yeah. And they also really want to nail you down on location, because a lot of these are now hybrid, at least in the Bay Area. So they're like, are you willing to move around? And so those are the two questions I see.
Yeah, that's great. That's really good feedback. And we can talk through that later too. I have some tips on the salary requirement question. If we have time at the end, we can talk through that as well. I know that's kind of one that's a little bit, sometimes people find that uncomfortable, and it's a little bit hard to kind of state your ground, so to speak. Thanks for chiming in. So just if it's an unplanned interview, most of our conversation tonight is going to be around an actual planned interview, but I did want to give you a few tips just to kind of prepare yourself for unplanned interviews. So we live in such an age now, and I'm kind of basing off of how I work. So you may be different, but I generally speaking, I don't answer a phone call unless I know the number nowadays. If it doesn't pop up as somebody I know, I'm usually not going to take the time to answer it. But if you are maybe not so harsh as me, I guess, in that respect, I would advise you, if it's not a good time to talk, just don't answer the call. So assume that, if you're in the hiring process and you're putting your phone number out there, assume that if you get a phone call from a number you don't know, that it is a recruiter, and just make your decision on whether you take that call based on that assumption. Obviously, like me, I have young children and it's often loud in my home, and I'm in the car. That wouldn't be a good time for me. So I definitely wouldn't answer. To that end, I would say, make sure your voicemail recording is clean and concise and something presentable, right? Like, hey, yo, what's up? My name's Audrey. Thanks. Leave me a message. Nothing crazy, to make it professional, of course. And then hopefully you'll be good to go there. Obviously, I'm really bad at this too, but if you're not going to answer, be sure and check your voicemails, and then call back as well with a prompt return. And we're going to practice a good bit of this here in a little bit, but return that call promptly, and then return it with intention and with enthusiasm. So the nice thing about this situation is, if you don't answer that call and you do have a voicemail, it gives you a little bit of time to help you jog your memory of that job. Oh yeah, which job was that I applied for? Let me go quick look at their website. Let me take a look at what the job posting was, so that I am putting my best foot forward when I return that phone call. And we will be working on this TMA, which is short for tell me about yourself. So have that, which is really your elevator pitch, have that ready to rock and roll for that return phone call as well. Okay, let's jump into more of what we would anticipate on planned interviews. If I can get my screen to come. So really this applies for not just phone interviews, but just interviewing in general. I feel like, maybe it's the mom in me or something along those lines, but I can be a really good internet super sleuth and really kind of dig into, what do I know about the company. So jump in there and, do a little research, look at Glassdoor and look at the company website and see what's going on there. Look at the different ways that you can interact with that company. So, for example, if you go on there and they have a website where they're selling some of their products, think about how they would use that in the Salesforce realm. Do they have chat on their website? If so, that could be built out via Service Cloud and Salesforce. So just kind of do some digging around to figure out what you can about the company so that you're ready to rock and roll in that planned interview. In addition to knowing the company, I really encourage you to know the role. So take a step back and ask yourself, how does this role contribute to the company on the whole? So am I going to be an administrator where I likely am internal and I am taking tickets from internal folks and I'm helping them with, reporting and dashboarding and maybe some automation? Am I siloed in that I'm in a big company and I'm part of a team of administrators and there's several of us and maybe I serve one specific department or a different branch within the company? Really dig in and think about how this role applies to the company at large and how Salesforce specifically most likely is used from them. And you can learn a lot of that from what? Does anybody have any idea? There's at least two things where you could learn a lot about the company, how the role will work, and how they might use Salesforce. Anybody have any thoughts?
We have a comment in the chat from Joy,
Yeah.
their website.
Yes.
It says current employees, networking with them.
Yeah. Yeah. There's one other big one that I really coach people a lot on. Think about, how do you know what they're expecting out of this job? How do you know what they're wanting you to do? Anybody?
Some other comments in the chat. Job description.
There.
Yep.
Yeah. Your job description is like your map. That's what I tell folks on mock interviews, is it's like your map to this company. It's really almost like the syllabus for the role, right? So you kind of got the cheat sheet. So study that. And if they mention Salesforce maps, there's a pretty good chance you're going to be doing some of that. So think about how that applies and what you could learn going into that. Really use that as your litmus in terms of what you need to know, at least at a basic level, not deep down necessarily, but at a basic level, and then prepare for that accordingly. So when we talk about the different roles, things to think about specifically, if your role is more leaning consultancy, then you'd want to think through the business process. And there's a good chance that you're going to be jumping between a lot of different orgs for different companies. If you're an admin, like I said, you'd be looking at more ticket management and reporting and dashboarding. So think through questions that you might ask in relation to that. If you're going to be a BA, you're probably going to be a wizard at writing user stories and discovery and story grooming and training and, loose charts and those types of things. So just think through how that all applies to the position and, be prepared to speak to those things in your phone interview. So far, we've talked about know the company, know the role, and then know the person. Who is it that you're talking to on this phone interview? If it's the recruiter, then kind of check them out on LinkedIn. Are they seasoned? Are they maybe a little bit newer? Have they been somewhere that you're familiar with? Or maybe they have a role that in their history that you are familiar with as well. And that's a good way to connect with them. And then just determine what is their role within the company. If they're technical, So if you're talking to the delivery manager who's maybe a little bit more technical, or maybe it is that company owner at a small shop who's really built this company from the ground up, you can probably guess they're technical. So you need to at least be prepared for a little bit of a technical interview. That doesn't mean that you need to, have your demo org up and be able to talk through all of it on a phone interview, but know some of the basics and be prepared to answer some technical questions, just enough that it doesn't catch you off guard. If they're not technical, then it's just more basic general questions, probably about yourself and your background and those types of things. Okay. So what I want you all to do is to practice your super sleuth skills. I'm going to put this link in the chat, hopefully. And I'd like you to look at this job. It's a job posting for DuPont Circle Solutions for a consultant. Did the link come through?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to look at this. While you all do that, do I have 2 volunteers that would let me kind of use you as an example? And I'm just going to take a peek at your LinkedIn and get a feel for your background. Anybody?
You can use mine. I just started it, so it's not
Okay,
it's not
perfect.
complete yet.
That's just fine. I'm not going to judge it or anything like that. If anything, it's going to give you a little bit of a jumping off point for a tell me about yourself. And
Okay.
I think I saw you raise your hand, Patty. Is that right? Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so what I want y'all to do, put this off my screen. I want you to take a look at this job posting, and I want you to come up with 2 job specific questions based on the job posting that you see. If it didn't pull up from you, I did post it here on the screen, at least a small portion. I want you to look for 2 people that you would connect with that work there. You don't necessarily have to connect with them, but do a little digging and see if you can find anybody whom you might be able to make a connection with, and then determine what industries this company serves. And if you end up having a little extra time, what I'd like you to do is to think about how they deliver to those particular industries. If you have any ideas, for example, if you see they are heavy in, let's say, they help a lot of people who manufacture goods. Maybe they have, maybe they do a service cloud type side where they are, answering questions, or maybe taking in cases for products that didn't work, that kind of thing. Just kind of let your mind run a little bit on that. And let's take, it'll probably feel like a short eternity because I know silence sometimes does, but let's take 4 minutes and put on your super sleuth hat and give it a go, okay? Any questions? Cool. Let's start. Okay. How'd y'all do? You must have been awesome. You're just so thrilled with yourself you can't speak, I guess. Okay, 2 job specific questions. Who's going to be brave and share a couple with us that you came up with based on what you found?
I think I'd want to get a feel for, is this okay that I'm just speaking out?
Please.
Okay, I think I'd want to get a feel somehow for how many clients or how many projects I might be assigned to at one time.
That's a really good question. Great. That's a good one. Thank you so much for sharing that. What else?
Okay, I'll go again. I think I might be
Yeah.
interested to know what, these aren't the questions. I'd have to think about how to formulate the question, but these are what I'd want to know in my mind, I would really want to know whether I would be able to sort of specialize in one type of client or one type of project and get really, really good at that over a period of time, or whether I would be spread sort of more randomly. You understand?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what I would want to know. Now, a different question is how would I ask that appropriately?
Yeah, that's great. So I think something along the lines of how do you assign work at your company? Are you specialized in that you work with, the same types of clients and you really hone in and learn their processes, or are you spread more evenly where you get the opportunity to learn about a lot of different clients and the way that they do business? I think you want to pose it both as positive, like not like, oh, am I going to get pigeonholed into only learning about X industry? You wouldn't want to phrase it like that. Put them both as a positive spin, but then you're able to kind of flesh that out. Does that help?
That's a huge help. And I love how you said the second part, I think you said to have the opportunity to have the different experiences. Whereas I was thinking, what if I just have to, like, I don't get the chance to master anything because I'm spread thin, and you put a positive spin on that. So thank you.
Sure.
Yep.
Good. What else? What other job specific questions did you all pull out?
I have a very similar question because I'm looking at their industries, and quite honestly, they're all over the map. And I'm trying to find the common thread, like associations, foundations, nonprofits. So it's like I see a strong service component, but then I see private equity and VCs, and it's like, how interesting. And then growth companies, it's like, okay, maybe there's commonality there.
Right.
So yeah, I'd be really curious to see if people have, like, if people are niching down in this org, like, so that you're working with nonprofits, or do you get to work with, like, private equity and venture capital have some commonalities?
Sure. Yeah, that's great insight.
I'd be interested in how their teams are made up. Because it seems like you go on a project with a team, like how many devs, is there a QA, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Some other things that jump out to me in terms of job specific, oh, my train of thought just ran the other direction. It's similar to what Anita said. What is the structure within the team? As a consultant, would I be paired with another consultant, or is there a solution architect who would be guiding that process, especially as someone who's you don't want to imply that you're newer to the ecosystem, but you also want to protect yourself to make sure that you have the support that you need in those types of roles. So I'd probably ask a question something along those lines. Good.
And what does success look like in the role? What
I
is
love that question.
a successful management of the position? What are those metrics?
Yep. I love that. I usually recommend that in mock interview too, or what does it look like to excel in this position? To kind of give you an idea of like what a rock star performer would look like. Okay, did you find some people you could connect with? Anybody find anybody in particular that really jumped out? When I had looked at this particular role, I noticed there's someone who works at my current place who used to work there. So, kind of dig into that a little bit. Are there any talent stackers there?
Yep. Layla.
Yeah. So she'd be a great person to reach out to, right? And connect with. Right. Crystal mentioned before that they have a broad range of industries, which can sometimes make it hard to really determine what it is that they do. But, there's a positive to that too, where there's a lot better chance that you have some experience in one of those industries. That ended up happening for me. I did human resources for an architecture engineering firm, and the company I work for specializes in building products and also the AEC, the architectural engineering and construction industry. So I wouldn't say that's why I got the job, but it definitely helped that I knew a little bit of the lingo. So look for those things in the job description, in terms of what the company does, that are just little tidbits of things that you can kind of be the feather in your hat that really helps you to make that connection with the recruiter or with the position or whatnot. Awesome.
And I always want to know what tools the team uses. Is it a Slack environment? Is it a Trello board? Is it a combination?
Yeah.
All the tools, for me, the tools matter.
Yep, that's a great question too. Perfect. Well, let's keep going here, and we're going to talk a little bit more about kind of the structure of an actual phone interview. So usually, like I said, a structure of a phone interview is very similar to an actual interview, just a little bit more condensed and quick. So you would have that quick personal introduction. Hey, my name is Audrey. I'm a recruiter for XYZ company. This is a little bit about us. This is a little bit about the job. And then they're going to most likely turn the table, and they're going to give you the microphone, and then they're going to say, okay, tell us a little bit about yourself. And you kind of have to fill the void there. So we're going to practice that here in a little bit. And then once you get through that process, there's a good chance they're going to pick out a couple things from there and say, okay, tell me a little bit more about that. Tell me a little bit more about when you worked at this company, or tell me more about this most recent project that you just mentioned that you completed, or something along those lines. They might ask you a few job specific questions. Then they'll let you have the mic again, where they open it up for you to ask any questions that you have, and that'll be it. It'll be quick, pretty quick, all things considered. They'll probably tell you what the next steps are, and then it'll be your job to follow up thereafter with just a quick note to say, hey, thanks for your time. I'm really excited about the next steps and meeting with whomever they said would maybe be next, and then taking it from there. So of these real quick, of these sections, which part do you think carries the most weight? Buddy?
I'm going to guess the follow-up.
Okay. Good guess. Any other guesses?
Tell me about yourself. It's the hardest, worst, probably carries a lot of weight. How well can you carry that off?
You are right. Spot on the money. Let me tell you why, from my experience as a recruiter. I spoke to sometimes 10 candidates a day, right? And it's just a matter of picking up the phone and calling, picking up the phone and calling. And if you couldn't impress me, if you couldn't give me something that made sense, that was enthusiastic in that first 5 minutes, our call is going to be 10 minutes long and I'm moving on to the next person because I just don't have the time or the bandwidth to spend with everybody who I know is not going to be it is not going to make it to the next round for me. So it really is your foot in the door in a phone interview for them, not even for the next round, but just to actually have the full phone interview. There would be a lot of times where I would cut it short, just because I could tell right off the jump, it just wasn't going to be a good fit. So it is the hardest too in some ways, but it's also one of the very few in the list of questions that you practice in interviewing or whatnot that you can actually prepare for. Like you can pretty much guarantee you're going to get some version of this sometime in your interview process with a company, and you can plan for that and prepare for it accordingly. So we're going to do a little bit of practice on it. This is one of the things when I do mock interviews where I say, you really need to, if you want to be good at this, you really need to just practice it. And at first that might mean memorizing it, but you need to get to the point where you're past memorization and you're just comfortable rattling it off and it just kind of rolls off your tongue. And that next level is being able to tweak it and make it specific to whom you're talking to or the role that you're applying for or whatnot. So as far as how you structure a tell me about yourself, there are four components. So that first component would be a quick attention grabbing statement. So you just want to quick get their attention. And then where we tend to get things flipped a little bit is then we want to go to what we're comfortable with. And that is where we just came from, right? So for me, that was like, I wanted to talk about HR, but I couldn't do that because they're not hiring for me for an HR role. They're hiring me for a Salesforce role. And so I needed to talk about my Salesforce experience. Then you could bring in your prior experience from there. And maybe a little more so if it is applicable to the job that you're applying for. And then last but not least, I like to call it tying the bow on the package, just that quick little wrap up. And you give it back to them then to kind of continue on with the interview. As far as length goes, in a regular interview, I feel like 2 minutes is just about the right length, give or take from there. In the phone interview, I drop that down to a minute. You don't want to consume too much time because they're just shorter. But you do want to, give them each of these 4 sections, at least in part, a little bit.
Are you saying each
this is kind of
a minute?
No, ma'am, the whole thing in total.
Okay, got it.
Yep, that's a really good question. Thank you for asking that. Appreciate it, Crystal. So context-wise, sometimes when I was thinking through this, I think it's easier to write out the whole shebang, the whole 2 minutes, prepare that, and then kind of boil it down to what you actually would want to say in that 1 minute. So I kind of think of it like this. Does anyone know, we went to Maine not too long ago as a family. Do you know how many gallons of sap it takes to make 1 gallon of syrup? Take a guess. Kind of says it on here, but if you see the picture,
5.
It's about 40 to 60 gallons of sap to get 1 gallon of syrup. It's craziness. And that's kind of how this process goes. You start with this really long thing and you'll find that you want to put in all the things about your career because you want them to know all the things, but you really have to boil it down to like what is most important, what's most effective, and what do you really need them to walk away with. And this is kind of my professional example of this. So I was recruiting for engineers, and they're really, really hard to find. I lived in Nebraska at the time. They're really hard to find. And I happened across at the time, this was like probably, right about 20 years ago. I happened across a list online where all engineers had registered, and it had their name and their phone number. And so I was like, what the heck? That's like a gold mine for a recruiter. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to just try calling them. So at night, what I would do, I was straight out of college. This was my first job out of college. So I would just sit on my floor in my apartment and I would go down that list. And then if it said John Smith, I'd call John Smith and his phone number. And that was back in the day when people actually answered their phones and they didn't necessarily put into voicemail like I do. But I knew if John Smith answered that phone, I better get something out quickly, and it needed to be good. And it took me a little while to develop as a recruiter, my elevator pitch, right? So it had to be fast enough and quick enough and sticky enough that he would give me the time of day at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday evening to talk about a job he didn't even apply for, right? So that's kind of the mindset that I take when I look at these for you all, is really get something that's grabby enough and sticky enough that they're going to say, yeah, I want to spend the next 15 minutes talking to John because he sounds like a rock star. So I'm going to give you an example, and there's a couple things that I want you to consider. So I'm actually going to turn my camera off because the phone interview, right, is going to be no camera. And I'm going to give you two different examples, and we do this in mock interview sessions. You'll have to give me a lot of grace because I'm not Tara or Patty. But I quick did my homework as best as I could, and I'm going to try to get you a approximately 1 minute elevator pitch here. Tell me about yourself. And I want you to kind of listen to the differences in the two takes that I go at it. So at first, I'm going to pretend that I am Tara. I'm going to turn off my camera and go from here. Okay. We'll just pretend that I am applying for that consultancy position that we were looking at a little bit ago. So, well, thank you so much for your time, Joe. I'm really excited to talk with you about this consultancy position. I am an absolute data nerd. I have spent the last 20 plus years of my life living in data, and I'm really excited to talk with you about how I can bring that into this role and help you to just help you and your clients to streamline your data processes. I noticed there was a data component in this position, and I'm really excited about what that means and how I might be able to bring some of my prior background. I have recently finished a project in Salesforce where I was tasked with completing several different requirements as part of a team to build out a Salesforce org. Of course, I was drawn to the data side and how that applied. But we built out several different items using automations, reporting and dashboarding, setting up security settings, and really just working with the client to communicate what it is that they needed and to really troubleshoot what it is they were trying to solve. As part of that process, I really dove in a lot into the data side, and I was able to help them see different ways that they could streamline their data and that they could take, for example, the orders that they were bringing into their system and turn those into opportunities and to use automations to make that opportunity and order process work more seamlessly. I have a prior experience, several years using the ERP JD Edwards. And so I see ways that that applies directly to what you do for your clients here at the DuPont consultancy position. I thank you very much for your time. I'm really excited to talk with you about it more. And I'll just turn it back to you to see what other questions you might have for me. Not my best go at it, but that's kind of a spin quickly of what you might say in that type of thing. I tried to get that sticky statement at the beginning, that grabby statement, by saying that I was kind of a data nerd, right? And that's kind of what I've built my career around. And then I talked about my Salesforce experience and tried to tie in my prior experience with an ERP like JD Edwards that, you know, brings orders into a system, and we are able to use that in the opportunity lifecycle process. So that is an example for Tara. Let's move over to, let's move over to Patty here, and we'll look at her background a little bit, and I want you to listen to the delivery on this one too. Yeah, hi, my name is Patty. I'm really excited to talk with you. Thanks for your time. I have an administrative background. I've spent a lot of my time helping companies do different types of problem solving. I've done a lot of customer service, in order processing in my background. And so I really feel like I'm going to be able to connect and solve some problems for your customers and build relationships with them. That's something that I've really just enjoyed in my career. I have gone through a program called Talent Stacker, and I did a volunteer project for them along with the team where we just built out some functionality. And I helped with reporting, and I did some dashboarding for them. And I think that that'll really help apply. I think that'll help apply to this position. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. What else can I tell you? Okay. What takeaways did you all find from those two examples?
I felt like the first one was long. It was all enthusiastic and it was all awesome and relevant, but I felt like it was long. Did you mean for that example to be a little bit hard for someone to stick with listening?
I tried to make that one a little bit better, but I do agree. I think it was long too. I think I rattled because I was uncomfortable, and so it took me a little bit longer to get through it. That's good to point out. No, hey, I appreciate the feedback too. That's good to hear.
I thought the first one was brilliant. The way you tied not only your Salesforce experience, but your previous job experience into what the role was requiring. I thought that was actually brilliant. It was seamless. I thought it was really, really clever. Very well done on the first one.
I agree. I think I'll have you do my interviews.
I know, right? No, I've done a lot of them, so don't compare. And again, it wasn't the best that I've done, but what I was trying to show with the second one is it was okay, right? But like there was a lot of ums. I went straight to my prior experience, and then I kind of tried to show you how that tied into what I do in Salesforce, and that this volunteer thing that I did with this talent stacker thing that I signed up for has been kind of helpful, and you should hire me because of that. You know, I think we tend to default a little bit to that without realizing, like, no, the experience project that you walked away with gives you a ton of great experience. You don't need to call it volunteer on an interview. And it has a lot that you can talk to. And there's a lot of different ways that you can weave in your prior experience. You know, Tara has a breadth of, I mean, you really have a lot of experience that's directly applicable. That's not to say that Patty doesn't. She's spent a lot of time in her career too, you know, assisting and doing customer care. And so there's a lot from the sales side that she probably has exposure to that she could build on. It's just a matter of finding that. And then one thing that I really wanted to hone in on is just because you're not on a screen, you still want to really try to think you're on a screen, and such that your voice reflects your face and the excitement that you're trying to convey, even though you're on that phone, on the phone interview. And that's kind of what I was trying to demonstrate in that second example.
I just wanted to add, the first one, I don't know if you did it on purpose or not, but you did a really good job at answering what's in it for me for the recruiter. Like you told them exactly how your experience will help them and made yourself seem like the exact perfect thing they're looking for. Perfect fit.
Thanks for pointing that out. And that comes, honestly, y'all, that comes from studying job descriptions. And that's a skill that I have from my background, but it's one you can have too. Just study it and look at it. And like I said, use it as your syllabus. And then, like I said, that's next level skill to be able to look at that job description and say, okay, here's my general, tell me about yourself. But if this job is heavy on reporting, then what do I have in my background that really I can highlight in a 10-second diatribe to kind of deliver, you know, some information about how I can apply that to the job.
Audrey,
You want to really, yeah, go ahead.
It's Karina. My question goes back to my remark that your first one was, I think, so perfect in so many ways, but I critiqued it and said that it felt a little long to listen to. And
Yeah.
my question is, I just hope you're receiving my remarks in the way they're intended, which is with all
Oh my goodness.
curiosity and everything.
No, absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So my question is, and where I'm coming from, let me say, is that I get a lot of feedback, like, for instance, in clicked presentations, all positive, but feedback like just say 2 or 3 things and then give the person a chance to respond and then say another thing. So I'm working on that with myself. Do you feel like, here's the question, do you feel like if we don't get it all out in that first utterance, we're not going to be given another chance? Or do you feel like in these conversations there's back and forth? Not really? Or
Yes, I do think that there is back and forth. I think if you totally bomb on the first tell me about yourself, there's a good chance the phone interview gets cut short. But I don't share that to like make you super nervous. I share that just so that you realize that first question out of the gate does have a high importance. I've not done, and Anita, you chime in, or any of you others who have done some Salesforce ecosystem interviews, I've not done any where it just felt like there wasn't any back and forth. They've all been very much conversational. Has that been your experience, Anita?
Yeah, although I haven't interviewed since the first job I landed, I'm still the same one, but it was an easy conversation. I feel like those are the best ones because they get a feel of your personality and like, oh, I can see myself working with this person. They're normal. They can hold a conversation. They're likable, stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question, Karina. Other questions?
Yes. When we job description, we align with our experience, like and you do in the first one. If you do not have any relevant experience close to the job description, so how would you like to make it blend in to explain?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think you draw a little bit more onto your Salesforce experience, right? So your talent stacker project, if you've done clicked or anything, anything else like that, any other volunteering type things. Again, you don't have to necessarily say they're volunteer. And then I think one thing I didn't include, and I think you need to kind of time yourself. And again, I get a little nervous. And so I ran on and it was a little speedy in terms of my rate of speech. So you want to practice it, but I don't think it hurts to share something personal. I kind of sometimes will do that in my tie the bow on the end. I wouldn't share a lot, but you are who you are and they are going to work with you for hopefully quite some time. So to share, something like when I'm not working on Salesforce and developing my skills there, I really enjoy spending time with my family traveling or working in my garden or something small like that would be a little bit of a way to kind of fill some of that. But I think if you think hard about it, there's probably some things from a prior job that would be applicable. You've probably had to interface with customers in some way, shape, or form, or you got some computer skills, right, where you were working on, different programs. Maybe it's not the computer programs that they use, but maybe you had to learn a new computer program at work. I think if you really kind of dig down deep, I'm guessing you might be able to come up with more than maybe what you think of right off the top of your head. That would be kind of other experience that would have some applicability. Great question.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
what about
go ahead.
about wrapping up the call? Is maybe I'm just socially awkward in every single way because I'm thinking like even at the end of the call, it's sometimes I find myself saying, "Oh, goodbye, thank you," twice or something like this. Do you have any advice for the wrap up there?
I think that's another thing you can just practice, but mine usually is like, Joe, thank you so much for your time. I know you're busy, but it's been a pleasure to speak with you. I look forward to talking with you soon about this position. If there's any other questions I can answer for you, just let me know. Something like that, and call it good. Right, Michael? I love it. Cool explosion. I could kind of talk to your salary. I forget who it was. Someone had a salary expectation question. And that kind of ties into sometimes you get that at the end of an interview as well. I kind of advise people, we're in one of two camps where like you have a hard and fast number and you don't mind sharing it, or you are more flexible and you're really just trying to get your foot in the door. And it's not wrong to be in either of those camps, right? You just need to figure out which one you're in and then go from it. One kind of vernacular that I like to use, and I even did it on the HR side when someone would ask a question and I didn't know. I mean, I knew what the range was, but I didn't know what the hiring manager felt like was a good pay for their qualifications based on how the interview went. So I will sometimes say, that's a really good question. I don't really have a specific number in mind at this point in time. I'm really more, I'm really interested in the experience, but also really the total compensation package for the position. So not just the salary, but the benefits and the retirement and the time off and things like that. So I think that's something as we hone in a little bit more on what the role is and what it requires, we'll be able to hone in on salary a little bit more too. We have a couple minutes left. Is there a brave soul who wants to try their tell me about yourself? Okay, I get it totally. What I will tell you is it's definitely one of those things that you want to practice. A couple tips to share with you. Like we talked about, make it syrupy, make it sticky, and rehearse it. So for a phone interview, rehearse it without a camera. You might start with the camera just so you can kind of work on your expressiveness and making sure that comes across verbally. But then go ahead and practice some without your camera on. And it's one of those things, like I said, you just need to practice. If you want to write it out at first, that's fine. Please don't read it. It's very obvious when it's read, especially if you're not looking at the screen or, you're off to the side or whatnot, and it comes across in your voice. But definitely practice it and, talk it through with a friend or a spouse, practice delivering it, not just to yourself, but also to other people as well. And then, you just kind of get in there and give it a go. And I think interviewing, I obviously from even the time tonight, you can tell it's a work in progress for everybody. So you'll do it and you'll say, oh, I need to tweak that, or oh, this went well, but this didn't. And you come up with things that, you want to work on a little bit. So just an encouragement that it's a journey for all of us. Myself included. I'm better at giving advice than following my own advice sometimes. But it's nothing to be afraid of. And I know y'all and your backgrounds are awesome and you've come through a really strong program. So you have a lot to speak to when you start this process. Any final questions?
Yeah, I had a question. If you go to 2, 3, 4 interviews with a company, should you have a few different teammates practice? Like you don't want to kind of repeat the same thing, even if it's not the same people, would you?
I'm not sure that I would. I guess I wouldn't feel like I needed to do that. I think at a certain point you kind of are who you are, right? You have the experience that you have. Could you tweak it for the person that's in front of you in terms of whether or not they're they're really technical? You might be more technical. You might spend a little bit more time on that. I could see you doing it that way, but I certainly don't feel like you need to come up with a whole different script, so to speak. I think you're good to just tweak what you have, or just roll with it too. Most often, I don't see, at least in this world, where you see the same person on calls, or you talk to the same people. I think you're going to see a different person on each call. So I don't think they're comparing notes between your tell me about yourselves, really.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Yeah, for sure. Great question. What else? Awesome. Well, I think we're at time. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Like I tell all the people I mock interview, I love to be your biggest cheerleader and cheer you on. I'm happy to answer questions as I have time. If you haven't scheduled a mock interview, definitely do so, and good luck as you finish out your Talent Stacker process, and just looking forward to seeing where you land in the ecosystem.
Thank you, Audrey. This is great.
Sure, I understand.
Siri, you had to chime in too. Awesome. Thank you all so much. Have a good evening.